Let me tell you something about high value. It's not loud. It's not boastful. It's not flashy. High value is quiet power, silent confidence, inner peace that speaks louder than chaos. High value women, those who know who they are and what they stand for, don't need to dominate a room. They own their presence by how they speak, how they carry themselves, and how they respond. When they talk to men, they don't compete. They communicate. They don't chase. They choose. And they don't demand respect. They command it by how they show up. They understand one powerful truth. You teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate, what you walk away from, and what you invest in. They don't raise their voice. They raise their standards. And that changes the tone of every conversation. They don't use words to impress. They use words to express clarity, purpose, and direction. And men, the right kind of men, they recognize the difference, not because they were told to, but because real value doesn't beg for attention. It draws it in, naturally. So how do high-value women talk to men? With grace, not aggression. With firmness, not fear. With intent, not insecurity. They don't play games. They play for growth. They don't pretend. They present. And they're not here to be liked by everyone. They're here to be aligned with the right ones. So whether you're in business and love or just in life, speak like someone who knows the worth of your words. And remember, how you talk reflects how you think, and how you think shapes everything. Shapes everything, not noise or ego. It's not in how loud you speak, but in how clearly you know your truth. It's not about trying to be seen. It's about being at peace whether you are noticed or not. The loudest person in the room is often the most insecure, but the person who doesn't need to prove anything, that's real strength. Quiet confidence doesn't shout to be heard. It speaks when necessary, listens more than it talks, and never wastes words on validation. It walks into a room and doesn't need to announce its worth because it already knows. It doesn't react to every opinion. It doesn't chase attention. And it certainly doesn't crumble when it's not praised. You see, ego needs constant feeding. It's fragile. It thrives on approval. But true confidence is rooted deep. It's grounded in self-respect, self-awareness, and personal standards. It doesn't seek applause. It seeks alignment. It's not trying to win everyone. It's just being real, honest, and whole. High value isn't dressing the part. It's living the part. It's showing up with integrity, grace, and calm certainty. It's knowing when to speak and when to let silence do the talking. It's understanding that your energy is a message, even before your mouth opens. So many people chase validation, thinking that value is something others give you. But high value knows it's something you already have. It doesn't come from status, followers, or recognition. It comes from self-mastery, from how you think, how you respond, how you walk away when something isn't right for you. Quiet confidence is the kind of strength that doesn't need to argue. It just decides. It leads without shouting. It influences without demanding. And it attracts without forcing. That's high value. That's real power. And once you find it in yourself, you'll never need to pretend again. High value women communicate. They don't compete. They don't try to prove they're better. They don't argue to win. They speak to understand. They ask questions to connect, not to control. They don't interrupt to dominate the room. They listen. And because they listen, their words land deeper. They don't need to talk over someone to feel powerful. Their power is in their presence, not their volume. When a high-value woman speaks, she does it with intention. She's not performing. She's not seeking applause. She's not trying to outshine anyone. She's simply expressing herself with clarity. She knows who she is. She knows what she brings. She doesn't compete with other women for attention. She celebrates them. Because when you know your own worth, someone else's light doesn't dim yours. She doesn't try to be louder. She tries to be clearer. Her words are honest. Her tone is calm. And her message is grounded. She doesn't gossip to feel superior. She doesn't flirt to feel validated. She doesn't tear others down to build herself up. Instead, she chooses alignment over applause, substance over noise, truth over tactics. If she's misunderstood, she doesn't panic. She clarifies. If she's disrespected, she doesn't explode. She exits. She doesn't get lost in drama. She rises above it because her self-worth isn't up for debate. and her time isn't available for confusion. She communicates She speaks her needs, not with demand, but with dignity. She doesn't mask her emotions. She manages them. She doesn't play games. She speaks with purpose. She doesn't try to manipulate outcomes. She trusts her standards to do the filtering. When she talks to a man, she doesn't try to impress him, impress him, impress him, impress him, impress him, impress him, impress him. She tries to understand who he really is because she's not looking for attention. She's looking for alignment. She's not looking for temporary interest. She's looking for truth. She knows the difference between chemistry and compatibility, between ego and connection. And that shows in every conversation. That's why her words have weight. Not because they're loud, but because they come from someone who knows her worth. They choose men. They don't chase them. Because when you know your value, you don't run after someone to convince them of it. You don't audition for love. You don't beg for attention. You don't compromise your standards just to be seen. You wait, you observe, and then you choose. Not out of desperation, but out of alignment. A high-value woman knows that real connection cannot be forced. She knows that chemistry means nothing if there's no consistency. She doesn't chase because she understands something powerful. That chasing often leads to being overlooked, undervalued, and unappreciated. She knows her worth doesn't increase because someone finally notices it. Her worth is already set, already strong, already whole. So instead of chasing, she focuses on becoming more grounded, more clear, more certain of what she needs, wants, and will never tolerate again. And because she's not chasing, she can see more clearly. She notices red flags without justifying them. She watches patterns, not just potential. She evaluates actions, not just promises. She doesn't rush the process. She lets people reveal themselves, because when you're chasing, you're too busy proving you're enough. But when you're choosing, you're simply deciding if someone fits your life with grace, not pressure. She doesn't chase texts, attention, or temporary validation. She protects her energy. She builds her peace. And the man who values her doesn't need to be convinced. He just sees it. She's not interested in winning someone over. She's interested in building something real. And for that, she needs a partner, not a project. A teammate, not someone to fix. A man who shows up, not just speaks up. She knows that chasing a man often means losing herself. But choosing one means honoring herself. So she stays still in her power. Not passive, but poised. Not cold, but careful. Not silent, but selective. Because love isn't proven by how fast you chase. It's revealed by who's willing to walk with you at your pace. So she doesn't run after men. She doesn't throw herself at someone hoping to be picked. She stands, she shines, and she waits for someone who already knows what he sees. And when she chooses, it's not out of fear. It's out of wisdom. They command respect by how they show up, not what they say. It's not the volume of their voice. It's the weight of their presence. They don't need to announce who they are. They just walk in and you feel it. You sense the certainty, the self-respect, the quiet discipline behind their calm, because real power doesn't need to prove itself. It doesn't chase attention. It doesn't beg to be noticed. It simply exists, steady, still, and unshaken. When they walk into a room, they're not asking for permission. They're not adjusting themselves to fit in. They're not shrinking to make others comfortable. They're aligned, grounded, and intentional. Their actions match their words. Their choices reflect their standards, and their energy speaks before they do. People watch how they carry themselves, how they handle pressure, how they respond to disrespect without losing their grace. Because respect isn't earned in moments of ease. It's revealed in how you hold yourself when things get uncomfortable. They don't threaten people into respecting them. They don't guilt people into valuing them. They show up as someone who values themselves, and that alone sets the tone. They're not overly nice to be liked. They're not aggressive to appear strong. They know when to speak and when to stay silent. They don't over-explain. They don't overshare. They let their presence speak and their patterns lead, and people pay attention, not because they're loud, but because they're consistent, because they're steady, because they walk their talk whether anyone's watching or not. They understand one thing deeply. That how you show up in the world teaches people how to treat you. Not through demands, not through lectures, but through posture, through poise, through presence. They don't wear their worth like a costume. They embody it like a lifestyle. And because of that, people remember not what they said, but how they made them feel, how they stood, how they carried themselves, how they never had to raise their voice to raise the bar. They teach people how to treat them through standards and boundaries, not through anger, not through begging, not through emotional outbursts or dramatic displays, but through calm, consistent action. They don't demand respect. They model it, first by giving it to themselves. They don't explain their worth over and over. They show it through what they tolerate and what they walk away from. You see, people watch what you allow. They observe what you respond to. And they learn very quickly how to treat you by how you treat yourself. Standards are not about being rigid or difficult. They're about being clear about what is acceptable, clear about what is not, clear about what adds value and what drains it. Boundaries are not about building walls. They're about protecting energy. They're about honoring time, emotions, and mental peace. They're not about controlling others. They're about guiding yourself. When a high-value woman sets boundaries, she doesn't need to explain 1,000 times. She says it once, maybe twice. After that, she lets her actions do the rest. If someone disrespects her space, she steps back. If someone tests her limits, she doesn't argue. She simply enforces them. Because boundaries aren't for other people. They're for you. They're how you filter what's allowed in your life, how you protect what matters most. And when you stick to them, the right people stay, and the wrong ones reveal themselves. She knows that teaching people how to treat her isn't done through lectures. It's done through living, through consistency, through repetition. She doesn't shift her standards to avoid being alone. She doesn't bend her values to keep the peace. She'd rather lose someone than lose herself. Because the moment you abandon your standards to keep someone close, you've already started losing the part of you that sets you apart. She leads by example. She keeps her word. She honors her time. She doesn't say yes when her heart says a no. She knows that every time she allows less than she deserves, she tells the world that's all she's worth. But every time she honors her boundaries, she teaches people to level up or step aside. They use clarity and intention in conversation, not manipulation. They're not trying to twist words to get their way. They're not playing mind games to feel powerful. They don't hide their feelings behind riddles or mixed signals. They speak clearly because they value time, yours and theirs. They don't use silence to punish. They use it to think. They don't pretend not to care just to gain control. They're honest about their intentions, even when it feels risky. They'd rather be upfront than be misunderstood. Because to them, real connection can only grow in truth. They don't leave people guessing. They don't confuse kindness with weakness. They speak with purpose. And when they speak, They mean what they say. No emotional manipulation, no playing hard to get, no testing to see if you'll chase. They know that maturity isn't just in how you love, it's in how you communicate. They ask for what they need without guilt. They set expectations without demanding. They clarify what they're feeling instead of letting resentment grow in silence. They don't punish you with mood swings. They guide you with understanding, and if they're upset, they don't explode. They explain, because intention matters. The energy behind your words always shows. Are you speaking to connect or to control? Are you seeking understanding or seeking power? They choose connection. They choose truth. Even when it's hard, even when it means walking away from comfort to stay loyal to clarity. They don't use affection as leverage. They don't give love with conditions. They don't pretend everything's fine when it's not. They trust that the right person can handle the truth. And they speak it gently but firmly. They don't overtalk and they don't manipulate silence either. They're direct, but never cruel. Honest, but never careless. They've learned that clarity is a gift, not just for others, but for themselves. It protects peace. It saves time. It deepens connection. Because when your words match your heart and your heart aligns with your values, there's nothing left to fake. That's why they choose clarity. That's why they choose intention. And that's why manipulation has no place in how they speak. They speak with purpose, not for attention. They don't talk just to fill space. They don't speak to be the loudest in the room. They speak because they have something real to say, something meaningful, something rooted in thought, not impulse. They don't perform for applause. They don't decorate their sentences to impress. They know the power of silence, and they know when to break it. They don't share every opinion just to be heard. They choose their words with care. They value quality over noise. They know that not everything needs a response. Not every situation requires their voice, and that sometimes wisdom is found in restraint. They speak when it matters. They speak when there's something honest behind the words. They don't chase validation through conversation. They don't talk to gain approval. They don't rehearse lines to sound smarter. They focus on being real, not being right. Their voice isn't a tool for performance, it's a reflection of their inner clarity. They speak because they want to connect, not control. They speak to uplift, not to dominate. They speak to share, not to show off. You won't find them oversharing to get sympathy. You won't find them overselling to gain praise. They trust the strength of simplicity. They trust that truth doesn't need decoration. When they speak, it's from the heart. It's measured, intentional, clear. Because they don't need attention to feel seen, they are seen through their presence, through their calm. They don't hold grudges to feel powerful. They heal so they can be free. They'd rather have one honest conversation than months of silent resentment. They choose to build, not to break. They seek solutions, not sides. They value peace over pettiness. They stay calm in chaos because they've built stability inside. They don't feed drama. They outgrow it. And when people try to pull them into it, they don't engage, they elevate. They know their energy is too valuable to waste on games and gossip. They don't chase trends, they chase purpose. They know that image fades, but substance stays. That filters can't hide emptiness. That being seen isn't the same as being solid. They invest in what lasts. They build character, not just a brand. They know the real glow up isn't in how you look, it's in how you think, how you speak, how you treat people, how you keep growing when no one's watching. They live for growth, and they let everything else fall away. They understand that how you talk reveals how you think, and that shapes your world. Because your words are not random. They're reflections of your mindset. Your inner dialogue spills into your outer voice, and over time, that voice becomes the reality you live in. If your words are filled with doubt, your actions shrink. If your tone is bitter, your relationships suffer. If your speech is careless, your direction becomes unclear. But when your words are rooted in purpose, your path becomes focused. When you speak with faith, confidence follows. When you speak with gratitude, joy grows. They understand that complaining weakens you, that gossip disconnects you, that negativity, repeated daily, becomes your identity. And they don't speak in limits. They don't label themselves by their fears. They speak in possibilities, in intentions, in clarity. They catch themselves when they speak small. They redirect when they fall into blame, because every word is either building the life they want or dragging them from it. They've learned to speak from strength even when they feel uncertain, to choose words that reflect vision, not just reaction. They don't talk to impress. They talk to align. Their language uplifts. Their tone invites respect. Their conversations are filled with ideas, not idle opinions. They don't waste time speaking against others. They use their voice to speak for their values. They know the words they speak over themselves matter. They don't say, I can't. They say, I'm learning. They don't say, I'm stuck. They say, I'm shifting. Because how you talk to yourself is the blueprint for how you live. They protect their language like they protect their peace. No lazy speech, no emotional shortcuts, no toxic talk disguised as humor. They speak truth. They speak kindness. They speak direction. They speak direction because every phrase is either anchoring their growth or slowing them down. They understand that transformation begins not just in action, but in articulation. And when your thoughts align with your words and your words align with your values, you stop drifting. You start creating. Because in the end, the world you build is the echo of the words you choose to speak like it matters. Because it does. Speak like your future depends on it. Because it does. Your voice is not just sound. It's direction. It's leadership. It's leadership. It's energy sent into the world, shaping the people you attract, the choices you make, and the life you live. Don't use it carelessly. Don't let it be driven by insecurity or reaction. Let it come from clarity, from calm, from conviction. Because high value isn't just how you walk, it's how you talk. It's how you think, how you love, and how you choose to show up with grace, with strength, and with intention. And when you learn to speak like someone who knows their worth, you won't need to raise your voice. You'll simply raise the standard.